Only 6 people were in that room, and not one of them ever spoke about it publicly, not for years, not until the story was already too big to contain. What happened inside that private gym in Los Angeles in the spring of 1972 was never filmed, never documented, never officially confirmed. But ask the right people, the ones who trained in those backroom dojos, the ones who passed whispered stories from corner to corner of the martial arts world, and they'll all land on the same name, the same 4 seconds, the same outcome. This is the story of the day a man trained by Bruce Lee walked into a room with Chuck Norris and trying to prove a point. He proved one, all right. You have to understand the climate. The martial arts world in America was still finding its identity. Karate studios were opening on every corner, kung fu movies were bleeding into the mainstream, and somewhere in the middle of all of it, 2 names were rising simultaneously, pulling in opposite directions, representing 2 completely different philosophies of combat. Chuck Norris was already a legend in the competition circuits, 6-time undefeated world middleweight karate champion, a man who had competed across continents, beaten opponents who outweighed him, and never, not once, lost his composure in a fight. His style was Chun Kuk Do, a hybrid system he was developing from Tong Soo Do and other disciplines. It was efficient, devastating, ruthlessly clean. He didn't waste motion, he didn't waste words, he didn't waste anything. And then there was Bruce Lee. Bruce wasn't just teaching martial arts, he was dismantling every assumption people had about what martial arts even meant. His school of Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist, was built on one radical idea: forget the style, forget the system, adapt, flow, strike before the strike arrives. Bruce was producing students who thought the same way: fast, unpredictable, unbound by tradition. In one of those students, a man we'll call Marcus, because some stories protect the names even when they shouldn't, decided that the fastest way to prove Jeet Kune Do's superiority was to walk up to the best fighter in the country and say, essentially, "Prove me wrong." Marcus had been training under Bruce for 2 years, 2 intense, all-consuming years. He'd absorbed everything: the broken rhythm, the non-telegraphed strikes, the way Bruce could throw a punch faster than most people could blink. He'd sparred with fighters twice his size and held his own. He'd started to believe, genuinely, completely believe, that Jeet Kune Do wasn't just a martial art, it was a weapon unlike anything the world had seen. And he believed he was carrying it. Here's the thing about students who taste greatness secondhand. Some of them become humble. They understand that proximity to genius doesn't transfer the genius. And some of them get proud. Marcus was proud. He'd been hearing Chuck Norris's name everywhere: tournament champion, unbeatable, the best striker in America. And the more he heard it, the more it bothered him, because in his mind, Chuck Norris represented the old way, the structured, system-bound, rule-following model that Bruce Lee had explicitly rejected. He told people Chuck Norris fought inside a box. He told people Jeet Kune Do had no box. He told people he could prove it. It was arranged through mutual contacts, not a public event, not a sanctioned match, just a private sparring session at a gym in West Los Angeles, the kind of place with taped floors and heavy bags, in the permanent smell of rubber and effort, a place where serious fighters tested each other, away from cameras and crowds. Chuck Norris agreed to come. He didn't agree because he was threatened. He didn't agree because he felt the need to defend his reputation. Chuck Norris, by every account of his character, was a man remarkably free of ego in the way most people understand ego. He didn't need to prove himself. He agreed because that's what fighters did. You showed up, you trained, you tested yourself. Marcus arrived first. He stretched, he shadowboxed, he ran through his combinations. He was sharp, loose, confident, the kind of confident that fills a room before any action happens. The other 4 men present, training partners, observers, watched him move and nodded to each other. He was good, genuinely good. Then Chuck Norris walked in, and the room changed. There's a stillness that some people carry with them, not the stillness of emptiness, the stillness of absolute, total control. Every movement deliberate, every breath measured. Chuck Norris didn't fill a room with energy, he absorbed it, he compressed it,
He stood across the taped floor from Marcus, and there was nothing in his expression, not challenge, not amusement, not indifference, just presence. Marcus felt it. You could see it in the half-second pause before he spoke, but he recovered quickly because he was proud, remember, and he stepped forward and said something to the effect of, "I want to show you something." Chuck nodded. They squared up. This is where the witnesses all agree. Marcus came out moving, the characteristic broken rhythm of Jeet Kune Do, not a straight line, not a predictable pattern. He shifted his weight, changed his angle, created false openings. He was doing exactly what he'd been trained to do. He was good at it. He circled left. He feinted with his lead hand, a sharp, fast, convincing feint, the kind that makes opponents flinch. Chuck Norris did not flinch. He watched, just watched. Marcus shifted again, reset. He was reading the distance, calculating the entry point, looking for the window that Jeet Kune Do trains you to find, the exact moment between your opponent's thoughts where a strike can land before a defense can form. He thought he found it. He committed. 1 second. Marcus launched, lead hand low, rear hand following, a combination designed to overwhelm before the first punch even fully extended. Chuck Norris moved, not backward, sideways, a fraction, barely a step, with a timing so precise it seemed less like a physical action and more like a calculation, as if he'd already known at some level below conscious thought exactly what was coming and exactly where it would be. 2 seconds. Marcus's combination passed through air. In the same motion, seamless, no gap between defense and offense, no pause, no decision-making. Chuck's rear leg fired. A single kick. Low, controlled, devastating, not thrown to injure because this was sparring, but thrown with enough of the real thing in it that you could hear the difference between this and a training strike. 3 seconds. Marcus stopped, not because he chose to stop, because the impact reset his entire nervous system in the way that a real strike does, the kind that doesn't just hurt a spot on your body, but travels through it, briefly interrupting the conversation between your brain and your legs. 4 seconds. He was still standing, but barely, and every person in that room knew, completely, instantly, without debate, what had just happened. Marcus had not found the window. The window had never been open. 6 people in that room, 4 seconds of actual combat, and a story that would take years to fully surface. This is the part they really don't teach you in martial arts class. That's the detail that sticks with everyone who eventually heard this story. There was no celebration, no laughter, no dramatic moment of one man standing over another. Just silence. Chuck Norris stepped back, returned to neutral. His breathing was unchanged, not because he was performing composure, but because he hadn't exerted enough to alter it. 4 seconds. One movement. Nothing about his body registered the encounter as a significant physical event. For him, it may not have been. Marcus stood there for a moment that the witnesses described as the longest they'd ever watched someone process a realization. Not about pain, not about defeat in the simple competitive sense, about the difference between carrying knowledge and being knowledge. He had trained for 2 years under one of the greatest martial artists alive. He had absorbed techniques, principles, philosophies. He could execute them in training. He believed them completely. But between the moment Chuck Norris walked into that gym and the moment 4 seconds elapsed, Marcus discovered something that no amount of training can fully teach you and no amount of confidence can substitute for. There is a level of mastery that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't circle, it doesn't perform, it doesn't demonstrate its readiness. It simply responds. And by the time you realize it's responded, the moment is already over. The story didn't travel in a straight line. It moved the way all true underground stories move, one person to the next, each retelling adding a fraction of detail, a layer of context, a nuance that the previous version didn't carry. By the time it reached the broader martial arts community, it had the shape of legend. Some details changed, some grew, but the core, the 4 seconds, the single movement, the silence, stayed consistent across every version. Because that's what real things do. Real moments have a gravity that fiction doesn't. You can embellish around the edges of truth, but the center holds. What's remarkable isn't even the outcome of the sparring session. In a room of serious fighters, getting stopped by Chuck Norris in 4 seconds isn't embarrassing. It's information, it's data. It tells you exactly where you stand on the spectrum of mastery. What's remarkable is what Marcus reportedly did afterward. He didn't leave angry. He didn't reconstruct the story to protect his ego. He went back, trained harder, and according to those who knew him in the years that followed, he became deeply, genuinely humble in the way that only a significant and unexpected physical truth can make a person humble. The lesson went in. That matters more than most people realize. Chuck Norris has spoken over the decades about his relationship with the martial arts community and his own journey through it. He has spoken about Bruce Lee, their real friendship, their legendary sparring sessions, the mutual respect between two men who understood at a deep level what the other was doing. Bruce appears in Return of the Dragon. Their fight scene is cinema history, but more than that, it's a document of two genuine masters in conversation through combat. What Chuck understood, and what this story illuminates, is something he carried from his earliest days of competition. Speed matters, power matters, technique matters, but timing is God. Timing is the thing that takes everything else you have and decides whether it lands or disappears. And timing isn't trained in a simple sense. It isn't a technique you can drill until it's automatic. It's a sensitivity, a developed attunement to the present moment that some fighters spend entire careers chasing and never quite reach. Chuck Norris had it in a way that his opponents consistently described as unsettling, not because he was faster than everyone else, though he was extraordinarily fast, but because he always seemed to already be where he needed to be before you'd fully decided where you were going. That's not a physical gift alone, that's years of attention paid to the right things. That's the work nobody sees. Here's what this story is really about, and it's not about Chuck Norris. Marcus walked into that gym carrying a philosophy. Jeet Kune Do, the philosophy Bruce Lee built, is genuinely revolutionary. It's not a system of techniques, it's a system of thinking. It asks you to release your attachment to form and respond to what is actually in front of you, not what you've been trained to expect. It's right, it's profound, it's perhaps the most honest thing ever said about combat. But a philosophy, no matter how correct, is not the same as the embodied mastery of a man who has lived through thousands of real exchanges. You can understand water perfectly, its nature, its movement, its capacity to take any shape, and still drown. Understanding is not the same as becoming. Marcus understood Jeet Kune Do. Chuck Norris had become something. Not a style, not a system, not a philosophy. A fighter, in the fullest sense, a man for whom the principles of combat weren't ideas he carried into a fight, but truths already woven into his nervous system. You don't think your way to that level, you train your way there, and then you train past thinking entirely. That's the gap, 4 seconds wide, impossible to fake your way across. Bruce Lee talked about this. Not about this specific moment, he may never have known it happened, or known and chosen not to speak on it, but about the gap between understanding a principle and becoming it. He had a line, "Knowing is not enough, we must apply. Willing is not enough, we must do." He didn't say it to excuse weakness, he said it as a map. The point of Jeet Kune Do was never to give someone a shortcut to mastery, it was to remove the artificial walls that prevented a genuinely committed person from reaching it. It was permission to pursue truth directly instead of through someone else's rigid framework. But the pursuit still required everything. The sweat, the repetition, the thousands of hours of honest, uncomfortable, ego-dissolving work. A student who heard the philosophy and skipped to the confidence, who collected the map but didn't walk the territory, was working against everything Bruce actually meant. Real skill doesn't announce itself. It doesn't challenge champions to prove points. It quietly becomes capable of things that don't need proving. The room in West Los Angeles where this happened is gone now. The gym closed years ago. The 6 witnesses have scattered across time. Some gone, some old, some simply no longer talking about things that happened in 1972. But the story survived, because stories about real things always do. What does it mean half a century later? It means that the martial arts world, for all its rivalries, its competing philosophies, its styles and schools and endlessly debated hierarchies, occasionally produced men who existed at a level that transcended the argument. Chuck Norris was one of them. Not because he beat someone in 4 seconds. You can beat someone in 4 seconds and not be great. You can get lucky, catch someone off balance, benefit from a moment of inattention. But the witnesses all said the same thing. It wasn't lucky, it wasn't opportunistic, there was no scramble, no uncertainty, no moment where anyone in the room wondered how it was going to go. Chuck moved the way inevitable things move. That's not an insult to Marcus, that's not a diminishment of Jeet Kune Do or Bruce Lee or the philosophy that Marcus trained under. It's just a fact about what genuine mastery looks like from the outside. It looks effortless in a way that only makes sense when you understand how many years of effort were hidden behind it. The legends we tell about fighters, the mythic moments, the 4-second stories, the encounters that only 6 people witnessed, they're not really about the fights, they're about the question underneath the fight. What does it mean to be truly capable? Not confident, not trained, not educated in principles and philosophies, truly, completely, undeniably capable. The answer, across every tradition, every style, every era of martial arts, from the dojos of Okinawa to the backroom gyms of the 1970s Los Angeles, is always the same. It costs everything. It takes longer than you think, and it cannot be borrowed from someone else's greatness, no matter how close you stand to that greatness. Marcus walked into a room trying to prove a point on behalf of his teacher. What he discovered instead was the distance between himself and the point. That's not failure, that's the beginning of real training. Chuck Norris didn't say a word when it was over. He didn't need to. The 4 seconds had already said everything. And maybe that's the most important thing a fighter can learn, not how to land the strike that ends the conversation, but how to become so certain in your preparation that you never need to start one. Size didn't matter. Style didn't matter. Reputation didn't matter. In that room, in those 4 seconds, only one thing was real.